For 5 seconds. Colburn shoots the flush and score! The Flyers tie it with 2.8 seconds remaining. Excellent for them. So the Penguins have had leads of 2-0, 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier with his second goal of the night.
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah, and I'm here with Chef B, who's going to tell us about one of our sponsors here. Chef?
Yeah, O&B Puckcast is now brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. The winter months can be especially hard on our homes, from roof damage and peeling siding to frozen pipes and toilet overflows. Call Summit Public Adjusters before you call your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be stressful and confusing. Let Summit Public Adjusters take the stress out of the claim process by having our guys work for you. Get the most for your money and your repairs. The next time the big snow or the rain leaves you with some home damage, contact us for a free consultation. Summit Public Adjusters are licensed in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Learn more at summitpublicadjusters.com or call 215-752-0560. Just tell them that the chef sent you.
Yeah, what was that number again, Chef?
215-752-0560.
That's terrific. All right, we're going to carry on with the rest of our show. And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast. Yeah, it's been a little while. Episode number 145, brought to you by Flyers Nitty Gritty. And, of course, brought to you by Jim South Street, 400 South Street. 40 years of the best steaks and hoagies and fries you'd ever want in the grandest Philadelphia tradition. Make sure you get over to Jim's. And if you can't make it over and you live in the area, of course, they use DoorDash. So Jim's, South Street, 400 South Street in Philadelphia, PA. And with that, just want to let everybody know that Dan Silver is on assignment. He's not with us tonight, but we have with us Chef B. And how are you, friend?
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, so here we are, and the Flyers had the All-Star break. I was down in Florida, and everybody was doing what they were doing. And when we last saw you, episode 144, we talked about fixing the Flyers with Kevin Durso. And this time out, one thing has changed. Not only did Claude Giroux win the All-Star Game MVP, a feather in his cap, and maybe a further justification for making the move for him in a couple different cities. We'll talk about that a little bit later when we have Dennis Bernstein from the fourthperiod.com. But essentially, Chef, you know what it is? The Flyers are, after 47 games, 15, 24, and 8 for 38 points. Chuck Fletcher said, going into this year, I can't go through another year like last year. And fortunately, he doesn't have to. It's worse. What do you think?
Just when you think you couldn't get any worse, it did. Obviously, there's going to be questions. People are already questioning the whole training staff, the medical team, about all the players coming back to get that and getting re-injured for the same thing again, and players that are maybe not conditioned properly, then they're not coming in conditioned, and so there's a lot to be taken in, let's just say. And I like reserve judgment. I'm no doctor, or I didn't play one on TV. I might have played one in the closet with seventh grade with what's her name. But other than that, no. I think that they got a lot of looking inside themselves, like who's really essential to this organization. I know they did a couple little hires, but I'm looking at it now like, okay, not only do we need to revamp the team, it seems like we need to revamp the organization. And I guess they started that with, I guess that's one of our bullet points is with the hiring of Danny Briere.
Yeah, Danny Briere represented what might have been part of the blank check that Dave Scott talked about. If they can't spend it on the cap, they certainly can spend it to develop their organization, to do a better job of identifying and developing talent. And they made a lot of hires, including Danny Briere. And a lot of what he said was generic. I wasn't there for the presser, but one thing that caught a lot of people's attention and seems to be in simpatico with Fletcher and Dave Scott is that the Flyers don't have to burn this thing to the ground, and they can turn this thing a lot faster into a winning situation than that a lot of people think, like myself, who feel like they have tried the retool on the fly approach and did that to the point where they wasted Claude Giroux's, best years. So Danny Briere seems to think, along with the others, that the Flyers are closer with some different breaks to coming back to being a team that can be a reliable playoff team at the very least. What say you?
Okay. Is it possible? Absolutely. Is it possible? Yes. There, a lot of things are possible. First of all, we haven't really seen this team all play together, and when for an extended period of time, when we did see the team play together, it was the first 6, 7, 8 games of the season. They seemed like they were gelling. They were playing together all right. Over a long extended period, though, the injury bug got them. So, yes, I mean, can it be done? Well, they did it in New York. They turned it around faster in New York than a lot of other teams in the NHL do. I mean, usually you build your hockey team around drafting. This isn't like NBA or NFL. This is the NHL. You build from your goalie out, and you draft right, and you hopefully time everything right to where you have your apex players playing with some good budding young talent. Unfortunately, the Flyers don't have the luxury of that. I don't think the fan base will accept they might think they want a total rebuild, and I don't know if they want that total rebuild, because you're getting told now that in a regular year, that's 4 or 5 years. You draft somebody now that's maybe top 10, he can play in 2-3 years. So you're a good 4 years away before you get anything sustainable. And I think the Flyers fan base has lost their patience. They say they want that, but I don't think they're ready for the consequences of what they want.
Well, I mean, they saw this group of Couturier, Giroux, and then before them, Shen and Wayne Simmons, and more or less and Jake and all the players they acquired from the big 2011 draft. That whole era just basically passed us by, and the only player that's left is Sean Couturier, and he's going to start an 8-year contract by getting back surgery. So he's out for the year, and that doesn't augur well for a guy who's never been really that fleet of foot, has been wearing down a little bit here and there. So that's a concern. But we'll have to see where Briere fits in. Getting back to that, why don't we kind of hone in on that a little bit more? It's interesting that Danny had a really good shot, supposedly was in the running for that Montreal GM job. So they think he's a talent. And we talked about it with Kevin Durso last time, right, Chef? Where we could see a scenario where Chuck Fletcher gets kicked upstairs and is president of hockey operations, and Danny Briere has maybe a shorter leash than some GMs. I anticipate that's going to happen next year, but it's possible within a year or two after that something like that could unfold.
Yes. Okay. Dave Scott, obviously, he's a corporate guy. You need a hockey guy at the top to making those decisions. And unfortunately, I think Chuck wasn't making most of these decisions coming down the line. I think he was being told what to do for what they thought was the betterment of the organization. I think.
Well, let me stop you there. What's an example of that?
Oh, okay. Like example being the blank check. We're in a cap era. That didn't make sense to me. All the go out there and get what you want, but then there's not really much he can do. He's hung. he's cash strapped and in a flat cap era. And I think I don't think that he was the one getting enough freedom or luxury, I should say,
right,
to really go out and do what, I guess, make those tough decisions, because they want to hoping still, I guess, to try to keep the seats full. And I just don't think I don't think that they realized how much that this fan base was going to turn against them and attendance was going to be this poor. And I think that's why they're trying – the more they grip, the more it slips through their fingers is what I'm saying, upper management like that.
Okay. Well, we'll have to see what goes there. I mean, the Flyers also did some other things that in terms of promotions and organizational moves, Alan McCauley has been promoted to position of director of player personnel. Tom Minton, director of hockey operations. Then they hired some people from the outside with analytics. Catherine Yates had been with the Bruins, a graduate student with them, and now she's going to be full time on their analytical staff, and also somebody named of Cole Anderson, and he was with the Chicago Steel of the USHL. And again, he wants to maybe fill in some of the spots organizationally where we talk about Hextall drafted all these guys and they looked like they were going in a certain direction. And then so many of them either ran into a brick wall developmentally, you think of TK, or even went backward. And you wonder what's missing. Was it available in terms of information on draft day, or was it something that in the process of taking this guy from point A to point B to get on the ice with the Flyers are missing something. So it seems like they want to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, I mean, like kind of new broom sweeps clean. Maybe Chuck is getting the freedom he needs, and like, look, you can only blame a guy so much if you're holding one of his arms behind his back. So hopefully a new set of eyes and new people in the system and rearranging, reshuffling some things around will change the kind of result that we've been getting. I just think in my greatest observation of the Hextall era of drafting was, it seemed like if you didn't see the name next to their, scouting report, he pretty much drafted almost the same exact player all the time. You'd see their cards and it would say, reads the ice fairly well, fairly high hockey IQ, such like that. But they were essentially almost the same kind of style of player, and I don't think he deviated much from his thing. I think he knew what he wanted at the time, but you need to build. You can only have so many of the same kind of players, the mucker and grinders and the hardworking guys. You need some skilled talent, and I don't think he ever I always said, they looked pretty good on paper, but, we got to understand that these kids, just because like Isaac Ratcliffe, I love him, in his minor leagues, he scored 70 goals in one season, right? It doesn't always translate to an NHL level. And it's what we see now is the guys that the Flyers drafted didn't know how to adapt or they weren't shown how to adapt or guided or, I don't always blame the players if you're going in one direction because that's the way you've always done. And so somebody doesn't pull you aside and say, hey, guess what? We have a different plan for you. You're this kind of player like Big Rat is. He should be playing his body more and all that kind of stuff. And he did it, and to his credit, in a couple of his NHL games so far. So that's good. So, I mean, it seems like the players never evolved from what they were from the minors.
Yeah, and part of that could be something like that aspect thing you just mentioned with Isaac Ratcliffe. It was something Mike O'Connell, who was brought in last year. Now, he was notorious for making the Joe Thornton trade, but he also has a pretty good track record behind the scenes as kind of like a Lombardi-like kind of guy who can make a suggestion like that about Isaac Ratcliffe, and it's going to carry some organizational weight. So it looks like because Isaac is using some of his natural gifts, it's merited him a chance to, get some NHL playoff time. Playing time, I should say. And we wish, right? Playoff time. Sure. What a joke that is. We'll see what happens. He looks a lot different in the NHL this year than he did in the AHL last year or the year before, because he had a lot of injuries. So that's certainly, a big difference for him. So I think it's along those lines when you look at a Ratcliffe as an example of someone from the outside the organization making an observation like O'Connell did with Ratcliffe, and it seems to be paying off. I think they're counting on a lot of that type of thing happening with some of these hires in terms of identifying certain players analytically, even at the junior level. There's a whole lot of numbers they generate now. I don't know how useful it is compared to the stuff you get at the AHL or NHL level, because there's so much variance there, but it's not like it's worthless. So that's kind of where the Flyers are at right now. They have effectively, because of the injuries, and like I mentioned earlier, Couturier, and you look at the list right now. I mean, Rasmus Ristolainen, upper body injury, day to day. Derek Brassard has a very strange hip problem where he plays, then he has to take a day off. He's on the trainer getting a massage. Eventually he's probably going to need some off-season surgery, and he doesn't seem to have any kind of future with the Flyers. We may see him again, probably will, in a Flyers uniform, but to what effect? Joel Farabee has a shoulder issue from what I recall. I don't have an update on him. Ryan Ellis and Kevin Hayes both have been in and out of the lineup. Mainly Ryan Ellis is coming real close to the point where he's probably going to end up needing surgery. Hayes, according to Chuck Fletcher, is 50-50. After everything he's been through and the way this season looks, apparently they've waved the white flag. Patrick Brown is skating around and not a real big impact player. I think he was decent for what he was. Wade Allison should be coming back. If he could just stay healthy and play decent, that would be a victory. Wade, victory flag there. And Nate Thompson, to me, doesn't really matter. Nice guy, not, a consequential pickup. So, but the Flyers are missing all these guys. And, of course, they're also going to be missing that goal-scoring demon, Jerry Mayhew, who went into the boards in Detroit and has a swollen eye. So what happened is, they had Morgan Frost, who was a little under the weather. There's nothing to do with the virus or anything. It's just a normal virus. And he played in, Lehigh Valley over the weekend, scored a game-winning goal. And they called him back up, and Jackson Cates got sent back down. And because Mayhew was injured, now Jackson Cates is back up. And the lineup they're fielding tonight as we record versus the Flyers in a battle of Pennsylvania. That's a joke, a battle. Mm-hmm. Pennsylvania is a really weakened lineup, and it looks like this is how it's going to be for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, at what point do you, like you said, cut your losses? I mean, why? I don't understand. And if you have any care in the world about using Kevin Hayes later on in this, in his career here in Philadelphia, why do you even let him play anymore? Just shut him down. Just shut it down. Anybody that's questionable that you want to keep, like Ellis, all right, Ellis, in my opinion, should have gone for the surgery. If he's been flip-flopping and it's been this close, let me tell you, then, you got to ask yourself tough questions. And I've asked myself that. If I don't get it, is any of these things going to be permanent? What happens if I skate wrong or I'm playing a game and I get hit wrong or there's an accident or something? What then? All these other little things pop up. And if you're saying, that if you're answering yes to any of those questions, then you need to just sit out and take care of business. Do that. So I'd much rather see what a fully healed Ryan Ellis will be and a fully healed Kevin Hayes. I mean, he was coming back and he looked a lot better than I thought he was going to look, but still you aggravate stuff again and it just happens. So it's better off not to nag this. And if look, you got to start somewhere. If I'm Danny Briere and I'm Chuck Fletcher and I'm looking at this team and I'm going, okay, what do I got? What can I work with? Well, I can't work with a half Kevin Hayes at 50-50, and I can't work with Ryan Ellis with a bad wheel or whatever he's got. It doesn't matter, So shut him down. Go next year. Okay, I got 2 to work around with Carter Hart, and I got Farabee getting better, and hopefully Alex can stay good. I got 6 guys that I can work with that I know I want to work at. Cam Atkinson, I want to work my team around and start that flip and that rebuild, because you have to start somewhere. And you know, that's what I don't think everybody. I keep hearing blow it up, but it reminded me of the whole process that that the Sixers were doing. At some point, you have to field a team that can win, and you need to start somewhere. If you don't know what the first piece is that you're going to put in, like when you're building a house or something, or a winner or whatever, if you don't know what that first piece is, you're in big trouble. So, and it's the same thing when you're building a team. You need to sit there and go, okay, this is where I'm starting. This is my goalie. This is what I'm going to build my lines around. Boom. This is what my defense is. Who's going to anchor my defense? Let's go with it.
Well, and I think that's kind of built in with Hart and Couturier. I've expressed reservations about having Couturier at Hayes as your 1-2, and the dire need that they have to get a hold of a center in terms of what they're going to build and who they're going to build around. I mean, they're stuck with some contracts that answers part of your question. And the other part of it is when you talk about these rebuilds, it's the draft pick or the young player that you might acquire in a trade, between now and the trade deadline, or even over the summer. I think that's what's going to lead to turnaround. The Flyers have a lack of dynamic of talent, and they're probably the best player and the best player over the last 15 years for the franchise. Claude Giroux is almost certainly getting traded. And we'll deal with that with the DB, because I want to, I don't want to exhaust that while we have an expert and someone who's plugged in like him. But I don't know. I really don't. What do we have to look forward to between now and the end of the season other than looking at younger players? Cam York is probably going to come up here if Justin Braun, or I should say when Justin Braun and or Ristolainen gets traded at the trade deadline. You'll expect to see him. I don't think they liked him on his right side because he's a left-handed shot, and they wanted him to get more comfortable at the NHL level on his natural side. So I think that played into it. Then he went down to Lehigh Valley and he got hurt. So he's out right now. But they don't even think Zamula's ready. Who else you got? I mean, is Noah Cates going to come back from and he's going to come back and he's going to finally sign with the Flyers, because the Flyers obviously are going to have openings, and they're also, they're injured, and he could maybe even join the team this year.
I haven't watched the Olympics. How has Noah Cates even looked?
I haven't watched it either.
I know the United States is doing well, and but I haven't really. It hasn't excited me this year, the Olympics. So
no. I mean, against the backdrop of everything that's going on, I mean, the ratings are in the toilet for a reason. There isn't to get deep into that, but So I think that's where we're at right now with the team, and what we want to emphasize on this podcast is what is to come. We're going to be dealing with rumors. We're going to talk about, especially when Dan is back, we're going to talk about the young players that could be available, the young players that could be on the Flyers draft board, things like that. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that. And if we can pull some positive threads out of their play from here and out for the remaining 35 games that they can get them all in, then great. So it's kind of where we're at right now. In the interim, since we last joined you, the Flyers played a good game, and they beat Winnipeg 3-1. That was like forever ago before the All-Star break. And then they lost 2 games against Detroit. The game that they lost, the last one 4-2, was a better effort, 6-3. It's like they didn't show up. So, it's what can you say? But it was a better effort, and that's where they're at right now. It's these little victories that really amount to nothing in the grand scheme of things. And watching this team for as long as I have, they are in no man's land right now. They are really in no man's land, and you just want to be entertained. You put the TV on when we're done. We're recording right before the Penguins game. And Chef, we would never do that. I mean,
Nope.
we had Valentine's Day, you had the Super Bowl, and okay. But I mean, we could have squeezed in a podcast somewhere to not compete with the Flyers Pittsburgh. But what does it mean right now? So we're not going to pull the wool over your eyes, right? So
yeah, it's not. It's like this was taboo. You would never do one on game day. You would preview it the day before,
right,
or even a couple days before. It's like like Super Bowl, Valentine's. Oh yeah, another Flyers loss. I mean, that's what I mean. That's where we're at. It's bad, And also, you know what? And you hit the nail on the head there by what you said about something to be excited about. And you see people online, on Twitter and all the Flyers media, like grasping onto little pieces of something like Jerry Mayu, because he plays hard, he plays every shift, and that's what you want. That's what you want. But
what does that
you look
tell you
at his
about
skill level. His skill level isn't there, and that's the problem.
Yeah,
you said
exactly.
There's nothing to look forward to. Claude Giroux, 34, right? Going to be leaving this team soon. Most 90% positive, right?
Right.
And you look in the minors, and all you got is Morgan Frost. And I know at one point he looked like he was a decent option, but he's been given every chance by this organization. He's played on a couple top lines too, and he still hasn't really caught on or grasped or got it. And after him, there's really, Cam York is good, but there's really nothing to get excited about because Cam York's almost up here too. So you have your icon that is, the amount of games he's played as a Flyer and as a captain.
He's approaching 1,000, yeah.
Yeah, and he's leaving. And you have no heir apparent that is the heart and soul of this organization. Don't tell me Coots, because I don't see that iconism in Coots that I see in Giroux. I mean, there's a reason why Giroux gets mentioned. Other players with most power play points in the last 10 years and most this, and he's up there with the league leaders. He's up there with the good players like Crosby, Malkin, Ovechkin and all that. There's a reason why, and Coots isn't even close to that. And no, I'm not knocking him. I'm just saying, after G leaves, we got nothing to look forward to.
They're about as bread and butter, plain as you could get, and they need it. And the one guy who has a little bit of dynamic flair to his game, TK, it doesn't move the needle often enough with his effort, and doesn't use his skill package the way I think he could. I mean, if he just looks at a guy like Atkinson, who has less skill but much more determination than him.
Yeah, there you go.
I figure
right
that would rub
example.
in. I mean, just today, somebody was talking about how Pitlick was moved in that deal for what's his name?
Toffoli.
Right.
Tyler Toffoli.
Right. And so, boy, we miss Pitlick. And I just put there, I put down, effort every shift. It's like, shouldn't that be the normal, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, we're going to wrap it right there, because we have with us right now, we have Dennis Bernstein from the fourth period, and we're really looking forward to this segment. DB, how are you, man?
Doing great, Isaiah. Hey, Chef, let's do it, man.
How you doing?
We're doing great. We're doing great.
Okay, so let's do it this way. Let's roll around the league. Let's talk about the coaching changes, and we'll get into some rumors, and then we'll settle in on the Flyers, Claude Giroux, and all that kind of stuff. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Sounds great, bud.
So, Edmonton, Montreal make big changes. Coaching changes. Rick Bowness is barely hanging on in Dallas. St. Louis says, "Hey, we got to keep Craig Berube." What's the story in those four situations?
Well, I think if Martin St. Louis is really the coach next season, he better have the best assistant coach in the history of the world. You don't go from coaching 13-year-olds to coaching the Montreal Canadiens, despite the fact that, yes, he's a Hall of Famer. And I know people are trying to draw a parallel between what Rod Brindamore did in Carolina and what Martin St. Louis might potentially do in Montreal. But Rod was a Cane. Rod won a cup there, right? And I get it. There's respect when Martin St. Louis walks in the room. Even Cole Caulfield said he wore 26 in honor of Martin St. Louis. But come on, really? This is not going to happen. To me, and I joke about it, he's a corporate spy. he's going to see the reaction and tell Kent Hughes who wants to play here and who doesn't want to play here. So you want to evaluate that. What I don't understand, and somebody brought up a great point today, to practice at LA, why not elevate Luke Richardson and bring Martin St. Louis in as an assistant? Like, why are you going through this, I think, charade, to be honest with you, of bringing in Martin St. Louis? I guess it gets people going. He does speak French, so I guess that helps. But to me, I just think it's a temporary thing. And look, when you've hit absolutely rock bottom, and this team historically might be one of the worst in the history of the league, you can do anything. It's outside the box. Hey, there's not even a box now in Montreal. That's how bad it's got. Like, guys, when you watch this team, they're not competitive. Like, some guys don't want to play. And look, if Carey Price doesn't want to come back, then what do you do? Like, to me, there's a lot of question marks. And you know what? Despite all this, and I know Shea Weber's been injured and all this other stuff, but since I've covered hockey, they've not had a number one center. Like, that's the issue. That's the challenge to me. It's like, when are they? It's not Nick Suzuki, right? So to me, there's a lot of work to do here. And to me, so that's how I look at it in Montreal. Very different in Edmonton, right? I don't know. I know I don't like to use the word retread, but here's a case against not recycling a coach like Dave Tippett. Because Dave, at the end, was not patient. He was always changing his line combinations. Like, within game, 2-3 times a game, there was no continuity. Jay Woodcroft knows this organization. He's been an assistant coach. He was down in Bakersfield, so he knows the young kids. And I already could tell in the first two games, it's a different mindset with respect to, what Edmonton's doing in their approach to the game. And very ironically, the Kings are coming back tonight for the first time in 13 days. The first game is, it's the teacher and the pupil, right? Todd McClellan, Woodcroft was McClellan's right-hand man in both San Jose and Edmonton, and now the pupil's going up against the teacher. So I like the move for Edmonton. They have to do something. But, guys, it doesn't matter who's behind the bench. If they don't get saves in Edmonton from the goalie, it's not going to matter, and Kenny Holland's going to look bad. So do they make moves? Like, can you trust Mike Smith to be healthy? I don't think so, right? The Stuart Skinner, he was great last night in San Jose. If you watch the first period, they came at him hard. He made some saves, but do you trust these guys to make saves? You can't trust Koskinen. He's going to be gone at the end of the year. So I think that's the situation in Edmonton. Rick Bowness, I guess it's the last year for Rick Bowness. I don't think Dallas is going to make it. And then it's kind of time for a change because their window is closed. And you're talking about guys like Klingberg, and nobody's really brought up Pavelski. He's unrestricted to the end of the season. So the window's about to close. And Berube, he's earned it. And now he's transitioned. Jordan Binnington was the shit like 2-3. He won a cup there. And now it's Ville Husso. But they could be a dangerous team. I don't think they can go like 3 rounds deep and get to a cup final. But they're going to be a difficult team. They're probably going to be the first wild card, if not the 3 seed. They're going to be a tough team to play against. So I like the continuity in St. Louis. They certainly have played hard for him. They've got more talent. Tarasenko, they figured that out. Buchnevich, if Barry gets healthy, is going to help. So to me, I get all the moves. The big head scratcher, obviously, is in Montreal with Martin St. Louis. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, is St. Louis going to take some extra steps to try and go a little deeper in the playoffs? Do you think they're pretty much going to stand pat?
I don't know what they would do. Right, I like their lineup when they're healthy. I like their lineup, but Ben Chiarot is not going to help them. Right, they're not going to trade for Claude Giroux. They have enough depth down the middle. So to me, the logical pieces that usually maybe Klingberg to help the defense like a little bit, but is John Klingberg going to put anybody over? No, he's not that player anymore. Right, so to me, I think they stand pat. I think they have they can't incrementally improve that much to say, okay, they can overtake Colorado or Vegas when they're healthy, or even a Minnesota team, which I think people are counting out, but they really shouldn't.
Okay. Hey, so let's take a look at some of the big names on the fourthperiod.com trade watch list. And one of the first names out of anybody's mouth is going to be a guy like Jacob Chychrun of Arizona. Yeah. There's a lot of packages out there. And from the Flyers' perspective, when you think about what you're going to get for Jacob Chychrun, I'm just curious, what does that look like in terms of making a trade to, say, a team like the LA Kings that you know quite a lot about?
Yeah, well, Chychrun's probably going to take 4 assets, but I'll tell you this. If the rumors that you've heard about Florida offering Spencer Knight and Anton Lundell are true, game over. That's the trade. Nobody's beating that trade, guys. And so when Panthers signed that kid out of the OHL, that goalie, you kind of scratch your head. Well, why are they signing this kid out of the OHL when they have Bob and they have Spencer Knight? Unless they're trading Spencer Knight. So to me, I think if that's truly an offer, legit, like nobody's going to beat that. Like I love Anton Lundell. Like he's in the conversation for the Calder. He's probably not going to win it, but if that's what it looks like, from an LA perspective, you're probably looking at 2 first-round picks, an A and a B prospect. So would it be Turcotte, Velarde, and 2 firsts? Probably. But this is a guy who's 23 years old. We've gone to 4.6 cap hit. Like produces throughout the season because it's an anomaly. He's going to give you power play proficiency from the point. He's going to score. Not maybe 19 that he did last year, but 15. He's the one facet the Kings don't have. So would I be all in on him? Yeah. And the other team would be Carolina. Carolina's sifting around everybody. If you add Carolina, they love their defensemen in Carolina, right? Like they always looking to add defensemen. So it could be Carolina, could it be Florida, could it be another team possibly? But I think you're looking probably for assets, maybe not to the extent of like Jack Eichel, because I would not put him, on the same level of a healthy Jack Eichel and what Vegas got, but close to that return. Because again, the difference between Jack Eichel and Jacob Chikrin, right? One guy's cap hit is $10 million, which puts him in range for maybe 2 or 3 teams, and even Vegas is going to have challenges, right? I know people have these conspiracy theories about Mark Stone, but when you have a kid at $4.6 million cap hit, 10, 12 teams could really get in the mix for this guy at 23 years old, and he would help a multitude of teams. So it's a very different conversation because the market could be more competitive for Jacob Chikrin than it was for Jack Eichel.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's have a little thought experiment. And again, this is like from the Flyers' perspective. Suppose you can't get Chikrin, but you could get your hands on Ivan Provorov.
Mm-hmm. Well,
how different is that package? It's not as attractive in terms of salary. He's got 4 more years left at 6.75, and he seems to be more of a complimentary first pairing defenseman.
Yeah. But he's still a first-pairing defenseman, so I would think it would be 3. But here's the thing: in the context of the Flyers, like they have one defenseman signed for next year or 2, like they with Ellis. So to me, I don't know how you trade Provorov. Like you're really gonna have to get back an NHL caliber defenseman somehow, unless you really, really want to rebuild here. And look, I'll be honest with you, like I think that Chuck has to, and I know this is gonna outrage some Flyer fans. He has to re-sign Ristolainen. He traded a first-round pick for him. How do you justify that trade? Like you made the trade. You thought you were going to go for it. Now you're going to lose a first-round pick for a guy who had 1 season there and the team was bad. I think he's under pressure to bring that guy back. To me, I think he's going to stay in Philadelphia because of the cost that would to acquire him. And if that's the case, then maybe you could trade Provorov. I mean, that would be, to me, if they sign Ristolainen, then you can make the sense for Provorov being dealt. But if they don't, they won't have much back there that you can rely on that's established NHL talent. Yeah, you could go with kids if you don't really want to go there, but I don't know if the organization or the fan base has the appetite to do that. So, yeah, I think Provorov, you're right, Isaiah. He's not Jacob Chikrin, but he's still a first-pair defenseman, right? And he's at 6, and he's not outrageously priced. Is it
6.75?
Yeah, 6.75. Like
yeah,
you can get 3 for 1. You should get like NHL player, prospect, and a first-round pick for this guy. That's what you should get for a first-pair defenseman.
I'll tell you why I'm thinking that way. Because I'm looking at the Flyers lineup, and you're losing Claude Giroux. We're not holding our breath for him to come back. We can talk about that momentarily. But if you think about the Flyers down the middle are really not impressive. They're kind of slow and getting older. And we have Sean Couturier coming up on an 8-year contract. Yeah. Now he's getting back surgery, and he could have a comeback like Bertuzzi has. It's very nice after back surgery. But it's a little scary for a guy who started breaking down a little bit even before this contract. Kevin Hayes has had 3 core procedures, and now there's talk that he'll need a 4th procedure before next season. And the Flyers lack a dynamic element down the middle. If you look at the Flyers lineup and who they have, their best trade chip to get that second line offensive dynamo center is none other than, in my opinion, Ivan Provorov. So that's why I bring that up. It's such a dire need for the team.
But here's the problem. What if both Couturier and Hayes are healthy next season? Because you have those term on those guys, I don't know if you can do that move. Like, who would you bring in? Like, that you're going to bring in another center at what, $7 million? Well, then you better trade. Yeah,
can you
better
get
trade
Provorov?
JVR. Yeah.
Can you get a guy like Turcotte from LA for Provorov as part of a deal?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Agreed. Yeah. But look, I've watched Turcotte play. I don't know. I'd rather have Matt Boldy. I'd rather have he hasn't done anything. Right? He's that grit. Like, people want to draw, and since it's a Flyers pocket, they want to draw a line to Mike Richards. He's not Mike Richards yet. Like, please, he's not. He's 5'10". He's really intense. He might be too intense because his style of play has caused him some injuries in the AHL. I'm not sold on that player. So to me, and I know you need players in the middle, I think that Turcotte, if he's the head of the deal, that's a win for the Kings. Like, I would, although here's the thing, I would say that Velarde's the more talented player, but now they're playing Velarde on the right wing because he can't play at pace. So I think if you want Turcotte in the deal, I think you got to have one of the kid defensemen, maybe a Brock Faber and a first-round pick, because that helps you on defensively. I'm not sure, Isaiah, if you trade for Turcotte, you can plug him into the second-line center and say he's going to be your second-line center for the next 10 years. I'm not sold on it yet. I haven't seen enough, but it's to be determined because he's only, 20, 21 years old. Yeah, and Byfield's untouchable? Yeah, not for Provorov, no. He's going to be the guy. And because, hey, not for nothing, Phil Deneau is going to score over 20 goals this year, which nobody saw coming. Right? No, but Byfield, he's not going to, and not for Provorov. You'd have to. I couldn't think of the player right now that's tradable on the market that you would trade for Quentin Byfield. But we'll find out. Look, this is why the last 35 games for LA are important, not from making the playoffs because they're in reach and they win their games. They'll get in. But what's Quentin Byfield? We'll find out. He's played with Dustin Brown and now Anthony Ciu. If they do trade for a winger, the Kings right now, like, I would think Anthony Ciu would come out. Maybe you drop more down to the third line, and maybe you put another scorer up top because they do need it. But right now, Isaiah, short of some trade that I don't see happening, Quentin Byfield staying in Los Angeles for a very long time. Gotcha, Chef.
We were talking about how the Flyers do need that dynamic up the middle. Yeah. Somebody like the Minnesota Wild, they have a young center. That you think that Claude Giroux could be the answer to their short-term problems there, and possibly maybe even resign there. And is that the? I make a case that that's the most likely landing spot for him, because I don't think the Avalanche can really get enough done or move enough around to get Claude. And I think that St. Louis, like you said, they're pretty much they're solid the way they are. And I don't see Dallas doing anything. So they were the landing spots that I thought he could go to. What's your opinion?
I think, Chef, if you plug Claude into Minnesota, I think you're going to put him on left wing. And that's why I think JT Miller's a better fit for Minnesota than Claude. But if you put Claude on left wing, because if you look at Minnesota, look, they've done a great job. Love the coach, Dean Emerson. He's come in there, did a phenomenal job. Kaprizov, I saw from night one last year in Los Angeles. Here's a player who's changed the dynamic of a team. One guy, and it usually doesn't happen. And this isn't the NBA, guys, where you plug one guy into the lineup and all of a sudden he's changed this team. They were a boring-ass team that would get in the playoffs and lose in the first round. Now they're dangerous. Now, here's the thing with Minnesota, and this is why I reference Claude to left wing. If you look at their left wing, right now I think Jordan Greenway's their second-line left wing. He's got 5 goals. And he really hasn't progressed from a scoring standpoint, right? So they have their top line set. So Claude, I think, would be a better fit on left wing, and he can facilitate from left wing. Don't get me wrong. There are wingers that can facilitate from the side, not from down the middle. So I think he'd be a better fit on left wing. So he's a fit there. Yes, I don't see him as center. I see him at left wing because they need more help, I think, on left wing and center. I still think that Colorado needs to find a way to do that deal, right? Because and I joked about it on Sirius XM yesterday. I can't trust Naz Kadri's sanity throughout the entire playoffs. Like, he may do something stupid, and if he doesn't get suspended, then what do you got down the middle, right? Then you're short of center, and you could plug Claude in. So if you went McKinnon, not Kadri, and Giroux down the middle, and if Vegas ever gets healthy, and that's a big if, that with Stone out, who knows? But Vegas goes down the middle now. Jack, Carlson, Stevenson, Nick Waugh, right? Colorado, they had trouble against them. They got punched in the face by them last year in the playoffs. They would have a decided advantage, Vegas, in the middle. So you're right, Chef. It would be tough numbers-wise to do it. I think they almost have to do it out of necessity, but we'll find out. But Claude's going to be, again, like, I can't see Los Angeles, but I would think one of those teams, or maybe St. Louis. That could be another team where he could, provide that. But they have to get value for. Look, if Ben Trot's getting a first-round pick, which is probably going to happen, like you got to get something. You got to something legit for Claude Giroux, right? And these fans that have this fantasy about, well, you can trade them and come back. Guys never come back. They never come back like that. It's a fantasy. You want to play a fantasy league? Yeah, Claude Giroux will be in Philadelphia next season. He won't come back. He's done. He's one of the greatest Flyers of all time, but he's not coming back. He's going to walk out the door. Someone's going to throw some money at me. And Philly's not at the stage where they really need to bring him back as well. It wasn't like, okay, if we bring back Claude, that's the piece. If we add one more piece that we're going to win a championship. They're far away from that. The experiment that Chuck did this season failed miserably, and now they really have to start from a lot, to lower their expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about it, DB. I mean, this is a team, unlike the Penguins, who have been able to maintain some semblance of contention since 2007, 2008. The Flyers really since 2012 have been trying to kind of retool on the fly, not willing to, publish that letter to their fans to say, we're going to rebuild. There's going to be pain. Now their current tack is that, no, we're not that far away. We need to reshuffle. We need some more high-end talent. When you look at what they have, and Claude Giroux's out of the picture, and I described our situation at center and the injuries with Couturier and Hayes. What if you're kind of like the GM and you're Fletcher and now Danny Briere is on board as the assistant, what are you trying to build? I mean, you got Carter Hart. That's good. You like Provorov as a complementary player, and you hope that Ryan Ellis can get it together and play 70 games next year. But where do you go from there?
You can't be afraid to tell your fans that you're rebuilding. You have to be honest and transparent with them. And if you look at the depth chart, you look at the roster, it's not a contending team, right? And especially in that conference, because you've got Florida, Carolina, and Tampa, and they're not better than any of those teams. They're not making the playoffs, and not for nothing, the Islanders, the wheels fell off there. But you got to expect next season, everybody signed. They're going to be in contention next year. They had COVID, they had the schedule, they had injuries. They're going to be back in contention. So you can't be afraid to say, and the stuff with retooling and rebuilding and semantics and all this nonsense, saying, look, we're a couple of seasons away from contending. We have to go in and really swap out some of this talent. Like Travis Konechny, make a trade. Philadelphia, he might fit. LA, he could fit here. I know there's some discussion with him last season. So you've got to make some bold moves here. And the problem is they made the bold moves. They went for Ellis. They went for Ristolainen. And everybody said, hey, the guy's making bold moves. But when they don't work, then what do you do? So you have to do it again now. And again, there's not a lot of depth on the blue line. So to me, Isaiah, I'm telling you, give me the highest valued signed player on this team other than Provorov. I don't know. You can't trade Couturier because he's injured. Kevin Hayes could help a team, but what's happening with him health-wise? They're stuck. And I don't think it's not like, okay, now if we make one or two moves, we can be in the same conversation with Carolina or Pittsburgh, which seems to go on forever, or the Rangers. They're significantly they're in a class now with Columbus, which is crazy as it sounds. You wouldn't, if I told you at the beginning of the season, you would say, no, you're nuts. This is a contending team. There's a lot of questions in the offseason. I think from a Flyer standpoint, I think you should be excited because they're a wild card in this offseason. What does this team do? You can't stand pat, but you're right. What are the assets you can shuffle here other than a Provorov? And then if you're trading Provorov, how are you ever going to – I get it, Carter Hart's better, but who's going to be in front of them to stop getting 50 shots on goal every game? There are serious questions here, which, to be frank, I didn't think would be happening this early in the season or this offseason. I thought they would be a far better team, and now you scratch your head because of health, because of underperformance by players. And then Travis Sanheim. There's guys that have regressed as well. And to me, I think it starts with one thing. You put the roster questions aside. Who's coaching this team next season? Coaching matters, right? There's no way, and I know Bergevin's here in LA, and maybe he'll get on my case, but there's no way Don Ducharme should get a 3-year deal off some miracle run last year. So to me, I think step one for Chuck is who's going to coach this team, and what's the identity of this team? And I see it here in Los Angeles. LA became a checking team. And you see the left side, they have Oli Mata, Mikey Anderson, and Toby Bjornfot, a guy who's a 7th defenseman, a 22 and a 20-year-old. They're like the 7th best defensive team in the league. And Jonathan Quick and Cal Peterson aren't having great years. So who's the coach? What's the identity of the Flyers? Are they going to be an offensive team? Are they going to be tough to be? Are they going to be a checking team? I don't know. So I think that's the number one move here. We can talk about rosters till the cows come home. Like, coaching matters in this league. You see that Edmonton with 2 of the greatest players in the world, and they can't get out of their own way if the goalie can't make a save. So to me, Chuck Fletcher's move on this coach, I think is going to guide a lot of things next season.
Yeah, and that could be his last stand. I mean, you think about names like, for the younger team, if you're going to go a little younger, maybe David Quinn. If more of a veteran roster, you think of maybe Tuckett, maybe Luke Richardson, who was, outside of a family tragedy a couple years ago.
Yes,
it has kind of elevated his status, and he has a history with the Flyers, but he's been outside enough where I think he would.
His perspective's different.
Yeah, and he is respected in the room. He was a player. He was a solid. He was a real effort player, and that's one of the biggest problems right now. And I don't know, DB, how much you watch the Flyers. I don't blame you if you skip it, but the problem is that a lot of heroes have developed in this town. These guys like Jerry Mayhew and like these AHL call-ups. You know what? Because they're giving effort every shift, and some of these more talented guys aren't playing anywhere near. If you're not getting results, that's one thing, but they're not busting it. And in this town, if you want an identity, it's an all-out effort team that it's just you don't it's tough to play against. And Flyers hardworking. It's a hardworking blue-collar town. It was. Yeah. And I think you have to start there. I agree with you.
Well, if you want to see that type of team, go watch the Phantoms. Like, you're not watching like the Flyers. Like, this is elite. You have to have elite talent that wants to play. And again, like, these are the decisions that need to be made over the last 30 games. Like, who wants to be here? Like, who's playing hard? Like, and I agree with you. Like, yeah, I get like the AHL call-ups. Of course they're going to come in and play hard. This is their one shot probably for like a Mayhew or a Sealer or guys like that. It's like, but when you watch it, and I'm like, so when LA went in there and lost that team, I'm like, what are you doing losing to this team? I don't care if it was a back-to-back or the day game or whatever. It's not like, I understand why fans aren't showing up, right? Like, you're seeing AHL level talent, and the NHL guys don't really have really, they've sold out the season. It's done. So to me, it's troubling because I know, look, I'm from the East Coast. I went to school in Jersey. I spent years at the Spectrum. Like, I know when the team's good, they're going to pack the place. The fans deserve better, but they need transparency from the ownership and management about what this team is going to be about. Like, where are we positioned? Are we going for it again? We're going to roll the dice again. We're going to make more bold moves. Or, hey, you know what? We need 2 or 3 years. Come watch some kids play, and we're going to reconstitute this team. So to me, I agree with you, Isaac. I don't know. I don't know what direction this goes in. But again, I think it starts with look, I love Rick Tocchet. I don't know if Rick's being a TV star is enough for him. Maybe that's good enough. Maybe he doesn't want the hassle of being fired in 3 years if it doesn't work out. And I agree with you on Chuck Fletcher. Like, this is his last coach. Like, if it doesn't work, he's not going to be the GM anymore. And I think that's part of the reason that back in the day, a couple of months ago, Bobby Clark went to bat for him and Rip Hextall to back Chuck Fletcher because he's still a company man. I understand the dynamic of that. But this is it for Chuck. Like, you hire the coach, you make some changes. If it doesn't work, then somebody's going to be the GM, in a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just handle one last thing before we let you go. The big rumor out there, honing in on Claude Giroux, was Adrian Dater put it out there that Claude Giroux has a trade list. His number one preference is Colorado. We talked about that. And the other alternate cities are Minnesota and St. Louis. And of course, I mean, listen, things could change. That's a pretty good source, but we don't always this early on, with the trade deadline a little bit away, if that's necessarily the case. But that doesn't give the Flyers a lot of leeway if St. Louis, for example, is not going to make a lot of changes or anything like that. Right. So it could be between 2 clubs. Yeah,
I think it will come down to 2 clubs because, again, Florida, they don't need any help. Carolina, they don't need any help. Tampa just gets guys for $1 million a year, and they play like they're $10 million players like Corey Perry. So they don't need any help. So, like, watch the teams like Colorado, as great as Colorado is, and you look at the runaround guys, it's been amazing. But, could they use help down the middle? Yeah, I think they could because of the power. If Vegas is totally healthy, what that could be. And Minnesota, yeah. The one thing about Bill Guerin, he's not afraid to take chances. He's an aggressive GM, right? So could I see? So if it's not Claude Giroux, it's JT Miller. I think they make one more ad there. So that's a team where if you added a player of that caliber, could you get through? You might be able to because, again, Colorado, all right, they're sold on Darcy Kemper and Pavel Francouz. Is that going to be good enough? I don't know.
That's my question.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. And now Robin Leonard's hurt in Vegas, and what's his story? And I don't trust the guy to make a big save anyway. So there are teams that, when I look at Carolina, Florida, and Tampa, they're set, right? They don't need any help. The Western teams. So I think to Adrian's point, I think Claude goes west. I don't think he goes east because maybe the Rangers, but again, they're probably in the race with Minnesota for JT Miller. Everybody keeps connecting the dots. He's going to go back there. Could they use help on the wing? Yeah. So to me, I think it's a situation where I think one of these Western teams thinks that Claude can put him over. That's probably what your best return is. But again, 9 teams aren't going to be in for Claude Giroux. It's going to be a team that has legitimate chance to get out of the West. So that's why I think that Adrian's pretty accurate with respect to the teams that he targets right now. St. Louis, yeah, I would have to peg them third of the 3. But again, what? Claude's not turning down a trade to Colorado, right? I mean, he wants a ring. That's easy. Minnesota is a really good organization as well. So it probably comes down to those teams because Vegas can't make a move. And Colorado, again, their deficiency in the middle, and they need a little bit more based on their playoff year against the Vegas last season. I think they want some insurance, so it would make sense to me. But to Chef's point, you're going to have to be able to move somebody and move some money here to make that work.
Yeah, you would think the Flyers would have to hold back half the salary,
Yeah.
Even then, we speculated that before you came on that they would have to move, either retain half the salary, but even then, it looks like they're still going to have to move somebody because I still don't think that would be enough. But I think, and tell me if I'm off base here, that probably the likely landing point would be Minnesota, with Fletcher knowing what they have in the minors and as being there before. He's got a pretty good grasp of what he could probably pickpocket, and maybe was it Marco Rossi? I think is the center, and we're talking about the Flyers needing centers, and that's like I said, they have the cap space, they have the picks, they have a young center that the Flyers could be interested in, and I think that makes the most sense to me. Even though I know Colorado was where he wants to go, but he did say he wouldn't mind the other 2 spots as well.
Yeah, well, I think with respect to Minnesota. I'll go back to last year's trade deal. If David Tavares gets a first and a third, you got to do better for Claude Giroux, right? So you got to get a legit A-level prospect in a first-round pick, right? And something, a third asset. I know it's a rental, but still, this is Claude Giroux. This is a guy who can make a difference for a team like Minnesota. So you look, and the good thing about it is teams want to add earlier. Isaiah, you mentioned it's 5 weeks till the trade deadline, but you want to integrate a player. The trade deadline is so late in the season. You want to make these trades now to integrate a player, maybe not today, but soon in the next 2 weeks to integrate a player into your line for the last 30 games, right? So to me, the one luxury Chuck has is time. He can hold Claude Giroux out, and if he doesn't like the offers, he can hold him home. He's got to pull the trigger on the 21st of March. You do it, but he's not in a rush to trade Claude, number one. Number two, Claude has a list, right? So it's not you could randomly call any contending team, call Calgary or whatever, that he won't accept the trade. So I think that certainly, narrows the marketplace for this player. But if I'm Chuck, I'm waiting. I've already made the calls to the teams that Claude wants to go to. And here's my price. If you meet it, we'll do the deal right now. If we won't, fine. And I agree with you both. There's got to be salary retention. But I think what that does, it raises the return, right? If you're saying, okay, we're going to give you Claude for 4, then I need something else. I need a third or fourth asset in the deal. And I think that that's job one right now. Job one in the offseason is obviously a coach and then whatever roster. But right now, it's what can you get for Claude? How can you get the best return for this player who's certainly, I think, can make a difference in one contending team's lineup?
Yeah. GB, I totally forgot and blanked on the I agree with you. The reports are that Ristolainen is someone the Flyers do, for the reasons you talked about, do want to re-sign. But I forgot to ask you about 2 UFAs that could have some value. Justin Braun could be useful for a playoff contender, and Martin Jones.
I'm not sure where Martin Jones fits because he's going to be a backup, right? So I don't know what I think, Isaiah, what would happen is if there was an injury here in the next 5 weeks to a 1B, like if Mrazek went down in Toronto, could you go to Martin Jones? I think right now he's not a difference maker. Yeah, Justin Braun. I think Justin Braun will get you. He's a depth add that could get you a mid-round pick. I think that's what to do. I don't think they're going to re-sign them if you go in a different direction. But for Jones, he's been better. But if he's your guy in game 1 of the playoffs, you're going out in the first round.
That is true.
Yeah, he's been up and down, but
well, he's definitely seen enough of them, in LA when with the Sharks career he had. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, he had a slight return to form, but nothing to get all excited about. Well, DB, tell us about what's going on with the fourth period and where you'll be appearing. Of course, we've got to talk about the hot stove on with TFP.
Yeah. So, trade deadline, TFP, thefourthperiod.com. We'll be doing video work as well, me and Dave Pagnotta. We usually every Wednesday do like market rumblings, like insider trading and TSN. We do market rumblings. We will be at the outdoor game in Nashville in a couple of weeks. So we'll do hot stove from there. Well, actually, I think we're going to do 2 shows that Saturday. Hot stove, I think, from some bar on Broadway before the game. Not that we're drinking during the show, but, we'll have some bar open up early because I think it'll be like 10 a.m. Eastern for our show there. And then we'll do a pregame show live from Nissan Stadium. And then trade deadline, and then we'll be at the Stanley Cup. I'm also now, one of the guys who co-hosts with Steve Koulias on the Power Play. So I'm usually on at least once a week as a co-host, and sometimes do the discussion room, which is an hour roundtable discussion. I guess today, if you see on the web today, me, Steve Koulias, and Mike McKenna, the former goalie, we do a roundtable discussion about trade rumors and stuff like that. So, and our Twitter account, I'm also on all these different outlets now, like Sports Grid with Scott Farrell. I sat and talked with Scotty at Super Bowl Radio Row last week. So if you want to find me, I'm not hard to find.
No, is that the guy with the real scratchy voice?
Yeah, Scott Farrell. Yeah,
that's Scott Farrell. How you doing?
Huge Pittsburgh Penguins fan. Hates the Islanders. Hates the Flyers. So yeah, but he's one of the few national
we gotta have
who really cares about hockey. Yeah, exactly. Oh yeah, Scotty's the best. He's amazing.
I'll tell you, I can't bust on Pittsburgh Penguin fans these days. I'll tell you with what we've been throwing out there on the ice.
Hey, Isaiah, coach.
That's
what the coach is about, right? With all the guys that were out of that lineup, right? He kept his team together. Like, that's what a coach does.
Before you jet, I want to ask you how we've seen the decimation of injuries with the Flyers this season. Yeah. I'm assuming that the coach is going to be the number one decision made in this offseason. But what about this training staff? I mean, do you have to start looking at the training staff of this team? Because there are 3 or 4 guys that came back and got hurt. It's like a yo-yo. And that's probably even worse for the morale of your team, thinking that you got somebody back and then he's off the next shift.
Chef, I don't know if it's a training staff or the nature of the player, right? Some players are just prone to injuries, right? So to me, I think, look, everything's on the table. You got to review everything. I'm sure Dave Scott at the top of the food chain is going to review everything, right? I mean, that's what you need to do. Once game 82 is over, everything has to be reviewed. And if it entails that, and I know, and other, not just this organization, but other people have said that, where you have a concurrence of injuries in an organization, is it the training staff? Are they too lenient with respect to players returning from injury? I don't know enough about to say that, but what I would say is that review everything. Everything's up for grabs. If you can make the organization better, and that's part of it, then you make changes. If you do your due diligence and say, okay, guys did return too early. Like, there was too much pressure on us to win because of all the moves that Chuck made, so we need to get guys back in the lineup. And plus, Chef, to be honest with you, they're hockey players. They don't sit out games.
Yeah.
Like, down the stretch, have you ever heard of a player saying, I want to take a few games off, we've clinched the division? These guys don't do that. They don't do that. It's not their nature to sit games out. So that's part of it as well, is that they're such gamers, and that's why I love the sport, because these players are amazing. As a group of athletes, they're the best in any professional sports. That's the nature of hockey players. Oh, yeah, like Mark Stone got a back injury, right? So that's like, he missed 20 games. He's still playing with a back injury that's had him out for 20 games. So to me, I think it's just a matter of reviewing everything. But I don't think that there's that much pressure on this team that you can put guys in the lineup and you're endangering their health.
Yeah. Absolutely. DB, thanks so much for usual stellar appearance, man.
Isaiah and Chef, always great being with you. Thanks for the time on O&B Puckcast.
All right. Enjoy your time, Nashville.
Thanks.
Take care.
Will do.
All right. So, listen, we covered a lot of ground there with DB. Let me get your feedback, and then I just want to do one more little topic I think people will find very interesting.
Well, I think he had a little bit of insightfulness, especially being so tuned into the West Coast where he's at. And I think that, as Flyer fans, I was always a Sharks fan, and when they came in, so I kind of followed them a little bit. So that being said, I think he's a little more tuned in to what we don't get to see so much unless you have the package and all that on the East Coast and all that. So I think he has some very insightful stuff in the landing areas. I think he's right. I think Colorado somehow has to make that deal. But if he doesn't, Minnesota's right there to steal G away. And I think he had some very good points tonight.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think he's right about the coach. I mean, it looked like AV was such a perfect hire at the time. And obviously in 20, things worked out real well. And then they had the bubble. And like we talked about, AV never recovered from the bubble. And he was a dead man walking, a lot like Lavi was.
Yeah.
When in, what was it, 12, 13? It just, it fell apart. And you could tell Lavi didn't want to be there. And you could tell early this year, AV was kind of going through the motions. I called it last year. I said, I don't know. I don't think he wants to come back.
Yeah. And
sure enough, we saw it happen, and it just filtered down. Okay, so the Flyers are playing tonight as we record this in Pittsburgh, and then they have 8 straight home games, longest homestand. And you would, of course, they do it at a time when it's basically garbage time, but they play. It's just what it is, You got to call it what it is. They play on Thursday night versus the Caps. Then they finish out February back-to-back Monday and Tuesday versus Carolina. The Blues come into town. That'll be interesting. And then 3 days off, and then they close out February on the 26th with the Washington Capitals again at home. So they play them twice in the span of about 9 days. So, so that's the Flyers. And then we'll probably see you before then or right after that game. Because I didn't print out what's going to happen in March. You got me on that one. So, next time I'll get that. But we'll probably be back next week because we got to catch up with some other stuff. One last thing before we go. I was listening to Shane Malloy. It was on Russ Cohen and Rachel over at the Locked On Flyers podcast. He's talking about how to build an organization. And he feels like not enough teams take the corporate view in terms of filling up all the spots in the upper management and the middle management like the Flyers appear to be doing. When we talked earlier about the analytics hires, Danny Briere, then Alan McCauley, and Tom Minton, we don't know who these people are. We know that we're not crazy about Valerie Camillo. She has no personality. She seems like an empty corporate shell. And Dave Scott is not really a hockey guy. And like you were saying, he might have been pushing the buttons earlier, like getting rid of AV. We're not really sure that we think AV should have gone, but we're not sure that Chuck necessarily wanted to fire him at that particular juncture. All that aside, it was interesting the way he wanted to put, and I'm talking about Shane Malloy again here. He says, you're trying to get a first line guy is so tough. It's easier to find second line level players, and you might be better off having 7 or 8 top second line level players in your top 9 and having a fourth line that's more like a third line and having that kind of consistent depth instead of having to try to get that star, because teams like that. And the first team that popped into my mind, even though it's not an exact fit, was the Vegas Golden Knights. That's more or less what they did. Their best player was if it wasn't Carlson, it was Marchessault, right? Mm-hmm. And they had to trade for other guys later, like Pacioretty and Mark Stone, and that came later, right? So, and then they went to the final, and they gave Washington a hell of a run, and Washington kind of knew their systems. There's a little inside story there that I have talked about on previous episodes. That they had a little trick to beat Vegas, because Vegas was really well coached, and they kind of caught on to that. But, there's a lot to be said for that. And I'm wondering, with what the Flyers are trying to do, I know they say they need more high-end talent, but if you're using the example of teams like Toronto and teams like Edmonton that have had players that are in the top 10 in the whole league, and they've never been able to do anything because of what's behind them, maybe that approach is one that we're going to see more often, and perhaps will be the idea that the Flyers go with. I don't know if it's really going to work, but I just thought, people should check out Shane Malloy. I don't know if he's on, I'm sure he's on Twitter, but if he's not, he's written some really good books about scouting. He's a really interesting guy. He used to be on with Russ Cohen. They did the Prospect Show for years on NHL XM Sirius. And so I thought I'd run that by you. I think it might be a new way of thinking, considering the examples I just laid out of teams that have had those stars, and they go years and years go by. They don't go anywhere. And Buffalo, for example, having to trade Eichel and trying to get lesser talent, but maybe more of that second line talent. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something to be said to have a couple top three guys. Of course, everybody wants that top three, and nobody wants, but if you have 5 or 6 middle six guys instead of, 1 or 2 top 6, I think you lend yourself better. I mean, the problem with the Flyers is we thought we had a lot of middle 6 guys, and it turned out to be bottom 6 guys. and they never I think DB said it, you have players underperform, get hurt. And, Dan at length has said, I never thought this whole team could tank, could underperform all at once. And we saw it. It happened. We were none of us were thinking that this team would we were expecting upsides given their past trending, from Travis Sanheim, Provorov, all them, all the young players on TK. We thought they were going to take that next step forward, and in actuality, most of them regressed. So I think there's something to be said about having a lot of number 2s instead of worrying about all the number 1s out there.
Yeah. It would be very interesting if the Flyers are in a situation where they are not going to go through that rebuild and they're going to go through that retool per se. Then maybe that's going to be something they're going to lean on, trying to get more really good players, like more Farabys, more players like that, and less emphasis on trying to get Eichels, McDavid's, Draisaitl's, Matthews, Marner, you name it. So,
well, what I'm concerned about is that they do not do well. Somehow they get a superstar in the draft this summer or the next summer, and they have no plan. There's no plan to support cast and behind it. So what are you going to do? You're going to bring this guy up, and in 2-3 years you've already wasted him. His development. It's and his thing, and it's like, oh Christ, we're starting Claude Giroux's career all over again, and that's what I fear. If we're going down the road of we're going to get a top 5 talent within the next 2 years, where it looks like they could possibly be that route if they get enough trades, if they get enough back in return from Claude Giroux, and wherever they end up in the lottery, there's going and where they end up in the draft, they could get in the next couple of years. They could get 2 or 3 top 20 guys. But here's the thing: what's your game plan? Like I don't trust the organization enough to have a guy that's that good. Maybe it's a top 3 guy, top 5 guy who will be able to make an impact sooner than later. And there's no plan in place because right now it doesn't look like there's a plan in place for anything. It's just like, we're just going to let it ride the rest of the season. That's fine. But I think that's the number one job in all seasons, to get a coach, a reputable coach that can maybe take a harder stance. Like you said, I thought I was crazy in my head a couple of times. I meant to bring it up about a Luke Richardson type or a Taka type. And you like read my mind. Somebody who can carry a room and be a guide for these young kids. I think, if you're going to end up going that route, but that's the number one thing. But you got to make sure that like you said, all those other little pieces that this organization is now looks like they're scrambling to do. Like with all these new hires, it seems like they're scrambling. They weren't ready for any of this. So if it's going to be a retool, fine, treat it like a retool, but do it right. But if it's going to be a rebuild, then I don't have much faith in that.
It's really hard to say what they're going to do. I mean, I think they could change their mind between now and the end of the season, and some of that might be the performance of the kids that they see, where they might have to say, listen, Sanheim's going to work out a certain way. We're going to lose him. Do we need to move on from him right now? Because we're going to have to pay him. He's going to be a UFA. These are decisions they need to make. Connecting seems like he's halfway out of here because he was almost gone last year, and they kind of let him know that. So he just didn't deliver on that. It won't be boring. And just in case you were wondering if we were lazy to look up March, so the Flyers will close out February, and the first week of March will be at home again, Edmonton on Tuesday, and then Thursday, Saturday, Minnesota, and then Chicago. Again, all at home. So we got you covered there. And somewhere between the next week and then we will have a show, and we'll talk about more. And hopefully Dan will be back, and we'll start talking about some of these kids. And with that, let's wrap things up for episode number 145 of the O&B Puckcast. And just a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck. We're on 12 or 13 different podcast platforms. Please rate and subscribe on Apple Podcasts if you follow whatever platform you have. Please do follow or subscribe, whatever applies on YouTube. It's a subscribe, hit that button, notification bell every time a new episode drops. We want to make sure you have it, because if you do the subscription thing, it helps move us up the charts for people that are looking for Philadelphia Flyer Podcast, which we are the official Philadelphia Flyer Podcast of FlyersNittyGritty.com. And with that, let's just say, Chef, where can people find you on social and where else?
You can catch me on Twitter, Chef to the Left B, and I'll be there voicing my opinions every once in a while. I mean, I've stepped back a little bit because there's only so many times you can kick the Flyers dog while he's down. So I'm gonna vow to be a little bit more positive and try to pick some good stuff out of these remaining games.
Yeah, well, try to pick feast on scraps. Anyway, so we also have a Facebook page. And we're also on Getter. Sometimes I will drop a nugget on the O&B Puckcast account that I don't want necessarily on Twitter. Maybe a little bit more unvarnished truth. Maybe not. And you can follow me, Isaiah, ISAIAH _520. Isaiah, don't forget the _520. And with that, we will end tonight's broadcast. Until next time, everybody, take care.